Wall Street Wrap-Up is supported by Bamboolas, featuring live music and coming soon, tapas and wine upstairs. Bamboolas, the heartbeat of Frenchman Street.
This week on Wall Street Wrap-Up, stocks tumbled with all the indexes falling into a sea of red. It was the third week of losses, so will this continue through August and toward the ending of Labor Day? One hopes. Inflation ravages mortgage rates as they reach the highest in 23 years. Fitch Rating this week downgrades U.S. banks following last week's downgrade by Moody's. So how will this affect home and commercial loans? Last month, for the first time ever, traditional television broadcast and cable viewing was below 50% ever. So what does this mean for television and the way you watch your programs? Well, tonight, we'll be talking with Steve Bornstein. Steve is the former CEO of ABC Television, as well as former CEO of ESPN and former head of NFL Networks, about the future of ESPN, which is owned by Disney and now partnering with Penn Gaming. So will Mickey Mouse now be placing wagers on NFL games, and will Minnie be upset with Mickey for doing it? I'm Andre Laborde. We've got these stories and more. It's Friday, and it's time for Wall Street Wrap-Up. Hi, welcome to Wall Street Wrap-Up. It's Friday, August the 18th. Well, first up, it was a down week for Wall Street, where higher bond yields spooked the markets, and what the market gave in July, it taketh away in August. Well, this month, the stocks that was known as the Magnificent Seven is now becoming the Not Magnificent Seven, because they've lost over $630 billion in value. Since the beginning of the year, this week, Amazon is now down 7.5%. Apple is down 12%. Microsoft is off 14%. Tesla, that's down 31% from their year highs. And this week, mortgage rates are going through the roof. This week, the typical cost of buying a home just went up. So if you want to finance with a 30-year mortgage, the cost of borrowing is now at almost 7.4%, which is double from just 3 years ago, which matches a high not seen in 23 years. At the beginning of the year, mortgage rates have climbed just over 12.5%, and over the last 12 months, it's up just under 40%. But just as mortgage rates have gone through the roof, so have home prices. Just 5 years ago, the median price of a home was just over $330,000, and the average mortgage rate was at 4.5%. Today, the same median price is now $416,000 with a 7.3% mortgage rate. So what's the bottom line? So in 2018, on the first house, you would have been paying $1,625 for a home and loan, and that's before property taxes. Today, you'd be paying 20% down, as $720 a month more in 2023. And since home prices have gone up, and you're putting 20% down on that home, in 2018, that 20% would have been just over $66,000 then. Today, it would be just over $83,000. That's an additional $17,000 from just 5 years ago, which also is an increase of just over 25% from 2018. That is called inflation, and that's why many people are staying put and keeping with their 3% mortgages and not going into a 7.5% new mortgage. So how did our money do this week? All the stock indexes ended negative for the week, and it was the third straight week of losses for the Dow Jones. The stock laggards for the session were communication services and discretionary, and it was the S&P's worst week since March. Well, this week, Dow Jones closed down this week at just over 2% for the week. S&P 500, they closed down for the week just over 2%. And the NASDAQ, they closed today at just over 2.5% for the week. Last month, for July, according to Nielsen ratings, the traditional way we watch television, such as broadcast television, is ABC and CBS, NBC, or PBS, where they dominate not that long ago, is now just 20% of viewing. Cable is just under 30% and has dropped below 50%, with now streaming taking over the way we watch television. Well, For the first time, we watch a particular program on a set time on a TV that's known as linear TV. The viewing public now watches these shows on their iPhone, on their laptop, or streaming services. Disney-owned ESPN will be entering a partnership with Penn Gaming to cash in on the online sports betting business and increase their revenues. Well, this week, analyst Dan Ives from Wedbush Securities said it's not a matter of if Apple TV buys ESPN, but when. Joining me tonight is Steve Bornstein. Steve is the former head of ABC Network, former CEO of ESPN, and he was the founder and CEO of NFL Network, to talk about ESPN and Disney's deal with Penn Gaming and streaming and much more. Hi, Steve. Welcome to Wall Street Wrap-Up.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Penn Gaming made the deal with ESPN to do gaming as a conjunction with ESPN. Do you think that was because of the loss of revenue that they were having with cord cutting?
They are suffering from cord cutting, not dissimilar to everybody else in the linear sports business. So to me, the deal that ESPN has struck with Penn is a really smart deal, and it's getting them into a space that I think could be very lucrative for both of them.
Why do you think, out of curiosity, why do you think ESPN chose Penn as compared to others?
Well, I think because probably they needed each other the most. I think Penn is fighting for more distribution. I think ESPN has been pretty accomplished in making the connection between the sports bettors and the sports facilitators. And I think this was a smart move on both their parts to take what is a challenging business and to see if they can actually be an influencer and make Penn even a more significant player in the field.
ESPN is owned by Disney, and Disney had a brand, I mean, with children and families and such. Do you think most people don't associate ESPN with Disney, so the separation is okay, that they can be involved in gaming while at the same time Disney is doing their movies and television and other things?
Well, I think probably the majority of people don't know that Disney owns 80% of ESPN and the Hearst company owns 20%. But I think people in the industry obviously know that because ESPN's been such a strong financial contributor to to Disney rather, over these last 35 years that they've owned them. So I think this is frankly long overdue, and I don't think this is a bridge too far. I mean, my position on gambling is that it has always been part of the American marketplace. For the last 8 years, it has been, basically legalized in over 30 states, but you've shined the light on something that has been common practice, going back, way before television was ever invented.
Right now, FanDuel and also DraftKings, from what I understand, take up about 70% of the internet online betting and gaming. Well, with this, is there enough of a business that are they going after the other 30% that's out there that is fragmented?
This will shake out, and there will be obviously some consolidation down the line, but I look at it a little differently. This is an emerging market. As I mentioned earlier, we're only legalized for sports gambling in this country in 30 states. So we have some big states, including Texas and California, that need to figure out how they want to approach this and tax this and be able to participate in what I think is going to be a lucrative opportunity both for the state and for these companies that are involved in gaming. So I think there's room for more than just two at the top of this pyramid.
I don't know how much their advertising budget for ESPN is, but would I assume correctly that if ESPN partners now with Penn Gaming, do you think that DraftKings and also FanDuel would still be advertisers? And would the revenue that they may lose, would the other be more enough to offset what they're losing?
Well, Andre, my experience is this: if it moves the meter for a DraftKings, a BetMGM, or FanDuel, they'll advertise on ESPN. If it's a close call, they're not going to want to give anything to what they'll perceive as a competitor in the Penn ESPN matchup. So I think it's a function of how effective advertising on ESPN is in moving the meter for potential competitors and whether they'll continue the same spend that they have in the past. I think it's probably likely that that the current players will reduce, or the top two players will reduce their spend on ESPN, just not to in any way feed a competitor. But if it's in their best interest, ESPN can still play a little bit of Switzerland and take everybody's money.
If you ask about commissioners of whether it be of mostly, let's say, football, but baseball, but if you ask, people know who Roger Goodell is, or Paul Tagliabue, or maybe Adam Silver, first commissioner that first started the whole thing off. And it was about gambling with Arnold Rothstein. How much of a firewall do you think that they have between and I know I'm going back many years with the Black Sox scandal of with Arnold Rothstein, but what type of firewall that they have to make sure that players and those associated with the NFL do not get involved in this type of gaming that we're talking about?
Gambling and gaming has always been part of the fabric of our society and the fabric of sports in this country. And what we've been able to do in the last 7-8 years has shine a light on what's going on. So you find that the integrity of the games will be enhanced by this increased scrutiny and the fact that we have monitors, we know who's betting, and we can track them. And you witness that by, in the NFL, finding some of their players have bet on games and they've disciplined them. And you see that in college sports as well, going on with Iowa State right now. And that's all a function of the fact that we've legalized it and we're actually going to make it a better and a more level playing field, both on the integrity of the games, the integrity of the officials, and the integrity of the players.
Mm-hmm. Will this increase the audience of football, or do you think that this will maybe fragment it?
Well, I think gaming will actually enhance the audience. It'll help aggregate larger audiences around live sporting events. I think it is a socializing mechanism where people can enjoy the games with their friends and have wagers and have opportunity to have more engagement on every level. So I look at it as net a positive.
Do you find that maybe more sports is with the actors and writers strike that are going on right now, that the networks will be wanting to increase maybe sports because you've got the field, you don't need the writers, you don't have to worry about actors, you've got a set amount of cameras and logistics?
Look, I think the televising of sports has, exponentially increased in the last 30 years. And do I anticipate that's going to continue? Absolutely, yes. Mm-hmm. The real urgency for networks in sports is the fact that it still is the sustaining content that is enabling people to pay retransmission fees and for cable operators to charge customers for their service. And live sports, and ESPN has been said, and I agree, has been responsible for keeping the bundle together as much as it has been in the last 15 years since cord cutting became a real issue in the cable universe. And that universe impacts network television as well. So their dependence on live sports, to answer your question, is only going to increase as cord cutting continues, and it's a pure economic issue. You have less people paying the cable operator and the satellite operator to watch and distribute your product. You need to increase advertising rates. You need to look for other sources of revenue, which is what ESPN has done with this ESPN Bet deal with Penn.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about like linear television, for our viewers, linear would be like if you want to watch a program at a specific time on a specific network on a specific day, as compared to you can now watch it on your iPhone and your other types of devices. Do you see ESPN one day moving, like what you were just saying, moving from a bundle type of cable viewing to only streaming, or do you think they'll always have their hand in maybe both of those pots about the future?
Well, they've said that they want to be able to take their flagship service over the top. I doubt very seriously that they'll ever take it exclusively to streaming. I think it'll be a hybrid event between cable distribution and satellite distribution along with streaming. That's, to me, is the one that makes the most economic sense going forward.
Well, Bob Iger one time he did an interview a couple of weeks back. I think it was on CNBC, and he was saying that everything is on the table when it comes to revenue because of the circumstances of Disney right now. Do you think that because if more revenue is coming into ESPN, that they may want to sell their percentage of ESPN, or do you think that this will always be a good cash cow for them?
If I was in his shoes, I would look at every option as being viable. I think ESPN is a very successful franchise for the Disney company, throws off a lot of free cash, and as long as they need that to feed the rest of their entity, I would be hard pressed to see ESPN being sold off. Having said all that, I think if a smart deal came along that made sense from Disney's perspective, everything would be considered, and rightfully so.
After you left, you were the CEO. Well, at one time you were the CEO of ABC. You were also the CEO of ESPN. But then after you left ESPN, you started with the NFL Network. Now you're sitting across the table from the same people you used to be in charge of and negotiating the rights of the NFL games. What type of good perspective that you had, that you knew, I'll use the term, you knew where the bodies were buried, you knew how much ESPN could pay, you knew how much ABC could pay. How advantageous was that?
It was certainly a lot more fun selling television rights than it is buying television rights.
Okay, yeah, I can understand that.
And when you're selling the NFL, it is the platinum standard of all programming content in this country. So it was a lot of fun, and yes, I think it's helpful that we were able to understand the perspective of the buyer when we were selling the NFL rights. But the NFL is a pretty shrewd and smart operation, and they would have done really well with or without me there. I think I made some positive contributions to their media plans. But the NFL Network's doing quite well. The NFL is even doing better. So they're a bit on the cutting edge of every media play in the last 25 years that I'm aware of, and what they're doing with NFL Plus and their digital approach is really smart. And they're just well positioning themselves, doing deals with both Apple and Amazon, gets them a feed into the digital space. What they're doing with TikTok and social media is best of breed, and they're really being smart about how they're exploiting and distributing their content.
When you started the NFL Network, did you find that did the broadcast companies such as ESPN, ABC, CBS, all the other networks, did you find that they felt that the NFL Network was acting as a partner to them, or did you find that they thought the NFL Network was acting as maybe as a competitor?
If you're on the other side of the NFL equation and you're at CBS or NBC, yes, you think it's a competitor because it's vying for the same eyeballs and advertising dollars that you are. If you're from the NFL standpoint, you look at it and you say the NFL Network is really a direct linkage from me to my customer, and I'm not going through the first time through any middleman. So that to me was the real benefit of the NFL Network, and it also influences behavior, which is probably the unknown aspect of the benefit of the NFL Network. When the NFL Network does certain things, that forces other sports entities to also, cover those events, whether it's the release schedule, whether it's the draft. and it has a amplifying effect, a network effect, as I think you would call it today. That's pretty positive in the promotion and marketing of NFL programming and content.
What surprised you, Steve, when you went over as from CEO of ESPN to the NFL Network? You have the commissioner, and I think if I'm not mistaken, at the time I think it was Paul Tagliabue who was the commissioner at the time, but then Roger Goodell.
That's right.
And I mean, the commissioner has lots of power, but then you've also got 32 owners, and as being an owner, they've got lots of power too. Did you find that you had to walk a fine line between making sure that the commissioner was happy, but also all the 32 owners, or how many masters were there?
Well, I mean, the NFL is run by the clubs. I mean, the commissioner is much more. I always like the reference. He's much more of a Senate Majority Leader, where he's trying to build consensus constantly among his ownership, and that's how they have been successful. I mean, they have rules in place that has a supermajority vote on anything that's important of 75%, and so I think that served them really well in that they have done. They've made their moves in general consensus as opposed to any kind of arbitrary dictatorial kind of ruling.
Were there some owners that, I mean, like I said, you've got 32 owners, and like you would have 32 personalities. And I'm thinking of some maybe like a Jerry Jones, who has the Dallas Cowboys, who's very intimately involved in the running of the team. And you might have some that were more hands-off. Did you find that some that would be more of the New England Patriots of Bob Kraft or Jerry Jones would be more hands-on as compared to others that you wouldn't hear from as much?
I think that's true. I mean, and by the way, most owners are engaged. When you make this kind of investment in an entity called an NFL football franchise, you want to make sure that it's run well and the league is run well and it's going in the right direction. So what I found was that all the ownership was engaged. Some were engaged on certain issues, some would be engaged on other issues. But at the end of the day, there was nobody that kind of sat in the back of the room and didn't speak their mind and didn't say what their point of view was.
I'm curious, ESPN has Monday Night Football, and for many years, ABC had Monday Night Football. Did ABC lose it to ESPN, or did ABC not want to have it anymore, and ESPN said, we'll take it? How did that come about?
Well, that's a much longer story than what we have.
Okay.
We have time for it here today. But I would say that ABC would have loved to have kept Monday Night Football, but at the end of the day, given what we were doing, putting our best schedule of primetime games on Sunday night and not Monday night, and ABC at the time really couldn't clear Sunday night effectively. They just had two major hits being launched, Desperate Housewives, and I forget what the other one was. So it was difficult for them to accommodate what we wanted, which was to make primetime Sunday night the preeminent schedule and make Monday Night Football a cable property. And at the end of the day, I think ABC, Disney would have liked to have kept both, but we're really pretty happy with getting Monday Night Football, arguably the most storied franchise in any sports history, on ESPN.
I don't know if you ever heard, Al Michaels told a story, and this was when ABC was having Monday Night Football. And this was when Howard Cosell and Al Michaels, and I don't know who the third, I don't know if it was Don Meredith, I don't know if it was O.J. Simpson or whatever, but the limo picks up the three announcers at the hotel to bring them to the stadium. And they've all got their matching blazers on, okay? So they stop at a red light, and Howard Cosell always smoked a cigar. He looks out and he sees two young men fighting, all right? And he tells the limo driver, pull over to the side of the road. So the limo driver pulls over to the side of the road, and Al Michaels said he didn't really know what was going on, but Howard Cosell gets out of the limo, followed by Al Michaels and Don Meredith, And Howard Cosell goes up to the two young men and goes, "Gentlemen, this is not the way to solve your indifferences in a pugilistic form of combat as what you're doing. I want you to shake hands right now and not proceed any further." Well, he said, Al Michaels said both kids, their jaws were dropped. One moment they were not trying to knock each other's blocks off. The next thing they've got Howard Cosell, telling them to stop. So they shook hands. They promised not to fight. And Howard Cosell says, "Now I want you to both go back to your dwellings and watch tonight as the San Francisco 49ers play the Chicago Bears," or whoever they were playing. "Now go ahead, young men." And Howard Cosell goes back into the limo, followed by Al Michaels and O.J. Simpson or Don Meredith. He picks back up his cigar. He tells the limo driver, "We can proceed." So now, I don't know if you ever talked to Al Michaels, but that was such a great story, and it sounds like something Howard Cosell would do.
Precisely. It's 100% true. You told that story extraordinarily well. Al has told that story to me, and it's totally believable. It's also a different time when there were only 3 networks, and Monday Night Football was probably generating a 55-plus share in its time period, and he was an icon of broadcasting, not just sports.
I hope you come back. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It would be my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Steve. Hey, if you've got a question, a comment about the show, we'd love to hear from you. Make it concise, make it pithy, and write us at andre@benacapital.com. So let's take a look at the markets heading into next week. But before we do, what car company started out as a textile manufacturer 86 years ago today? We've got the answer coming up. So what car company started out as a textile manufacturer 86 years ago today? Toyota. The Toyota Motor Company was founded on this day, August the 18th, 1937. So join me next week when we're going to talk about the economy and the falling stock prices and markets with the president and the chief investment officer of Wells Fargo, Darryl Cronk. We're going to talk about why stocks have been falling and how long will this last and when will we see a turnaround. That's Darryl Cronk, president of Wells Fargo, next week. Don't miss it. And that's our show for this Friday, August the 18th. Our thanks to Steve Bornstein for being with us this evening, but always we appreciate you for allowing us into your homes tonight. Have a fun weekend with the ones you love. I'll see you next week. And remember, if it's Friday, it's Wall Street Wrap-Up. I'm Andre Laborde, and also remember, money never sleeps. Good night.
Wall Street Wrap-Up is supported by Bamboolas, featuring live music and coming soon, tapas and wine upstairs. Bamboolas, the heartbeat of Frenchman Street.